Well, Dr. Robert Malone is say listen to the experts, listen to the science. He's a virologist, a molecular biologist, an immunologist, 100 peer-reviewed publications, over 11,477 citations of his peer-reviewed publications. He invented the genetic vaccines. And he's saying there's every likelihood that ivermectin may well be preferable to the vaccines. His words exactly, this looks like a very plausible scenario from where I sit.
What we've learned in the modern world is that the timelines for developing a new drug and the cost of either a new drug or a vaccine keep going up and up and up. So unfortunately, we're now at a point where to bring a new drug to market or a new vaccine to market, it takes more than 10 years and typically more than $1 billion. Now, we could talk about why that is, and that's kind of not our remit to solve the problems with regulatory strategies. But the truth is that it's just become a burden. And so what we've seen, particularly with infectious disease and emerging infectious disease, is that the pharmaceutical companies can't make a profit on any of these emerging infectious diseases, which is why they're increasingly disinterested. We call it outbreak fatigue. So the whole business model of how we develop medical countermeasures for emerging infectious diseases is broken. One of the only ways out of the woods that many people have started to think about and develop, both for oncology and infectious disease, is to recognize that we now have a rich pharmacopoeia of compounds with different mechanisms of action. And the NIH and others have done a great job of testing the various mechanisms of action and listing this all in a public database. So you can find this on PubChem and other resources. And one now can look at all of the compounds that exist that have been licensed, for which we already have safety data, we already know how to manufacture, we already know how to dose, and figure out which of those compounds have mechanisms of action that are likely to interact with a virus and block its ability to replicate in tissue. And if we can find compounds and combinations of compounds that have those activities of acting against viral host cell pathways, then the pathway for licensure and the cost drops from a decade or more and $1 billion or more to down to a range of, in the range of 3 years and about $50 million. That's a huge difference. Now, it's not fast enough because, as Zika teaches us, some of these emerging infectious diseases move extremely rapidly. In our case, it's taken us about a year to just come up with solid compounds that are good candidates that meet all our criteria of being able to be used in pregnancy, etc. But that's the reason for repurposing, is that our current business model and regulatory pathways for new drug and new vaccine development are a complete mismatch for emerging infectious disease in terms of time and cost. And we have to find a new solution. Also, behind that is the threat of engineered pathogens, which is really very similar type of threat. So for all of these things, the government, the World Health Organization, all nations now really have to find a better system. And we hope that what we've done in learning about how to repurpose drugs, working with the Army and the National Cancer Institute, is giving us kind of lessons and a path forward that allow us to do this much more efficiently.
On the ivermectin story,
yep.
Okay, that's the sticker for me, is that at the doses that are being advocated that appear to be effective based on the data, and I've been tracking the same data, those are known to be safe. And so you have a drug which is available in the pharmacopoeia, it's licensed. Physicians in the United States, at least in most countries, have the right to prescribe from the existing pharmacopoeia, even off-label for other purposes, okay, at safe levels, and they're being there is active consequences of physicians prescribing this drug openly and speaking about it. And yet they're administering it as safe dose. So if it's being administered as a safe dose and it's even marginally effective, there's no harm.
Right. Well, there's something
That
called
just doesn't make sense.
There's something called the precautionary principle.
sense.
This is really important. Okay. There's a precautionary principle of medicine. And this is what they use for mask wearing, because masks, which are mandated, they didn't even have a double-blind randomized control trial ever for mask wearing. You did the mandate, and then they did it couldn't be double-blind because you can't do that. Right. Yeah. Has to be a randomized control trial. So there's one trial in Denmark. Guess what happened? Failed. No, it was not statistically significant difference whether you were wearing a mask or not. There was a slight benefit, but it wasn't statistically significant. So everybody would say, they'd always say, well, it's not, so we can't use it, until it's proven, because I don't want to do an unproven thing. And yet for masks, they say, oh, it's mandated. And they do that on the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle says that, as long as there are no downsides, and there might be an upside, we do it because until we have better data. And they're ignoring that for fluvoxamine and ivermectin because they want to push the vaccine. So there's no alternative.
Yeah, they've reversed it on it. I would imagine that every time a new pharmaceutical is being brought to market by a company, they have some sort of meeting in which they say, we have this very exciting new drug. It has this potential market. The upside is glorious. Here are the assets in bringing it to market. Here are the liabilities. Oh, on the list of liabilities, there's going to be, well, here's a drug that's now out of patent that has effects in the same area. But you know what? It would have to be used off-label, and that can't possibly be safe. So this is what we're going to highlight. It's not safe to use a drug off-label. Something like that is going to happen. It's not going to sound like people being deaf to the idea that people are going to die by the thousands, right? It's going to sound like something else. And so anyway, what we do know now, and people have been on this apparently for months, I became aware of this yesterday, which is that Merck, which very conspicuously, another anomaly on the list, attacked the safety of its own drug, ivermectin, even though they knew from 4 decades of work.
Safest drug on the planet.
Right. So that was an anomaly. Why would Merck say that its own drug was unsafe? Surely this has
citing no evidence, too.
Right. Well, there is no evidence. Right. So why? Well, it turns out they have another drug headed rapidly for what? An EUA, right? So what does the EUA require? It requires that there's no safe and effective therapy existing, because if there was, you wouldn't take the risk of fast forwarding this process. And not only that, but they're also involved with Johnson & Johnson. They are partnered with Johnson & Johnson in producing their vaccine. So the point is, all right, we've got an anomaly. Why would Merck say things about its own drug that aren't true and that indicate that people should be afraid to apply it when the precautionary principle would actually suggest that they have to apply it?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Well, I don't know. It might have to do with the fact that their business, their portfolio of COVID therapies involves EUAs.
Yeah. So these days, there are really rigorous terms and conditions that have been propagated all throughout academic medicine regarding disclosure of conflict of interest. And this specific situation clearly meets those criteria.